Hello to the camera, to the ether. Sorry about that. Just got carried away by my hair for a bit. Um, I usually make these streams at night, but the habit is that I do it before sleeping. So I kind of haven't missed stream because I haven't slept yet. And that happened because I sat and procrastinated work that took me a grand total of 3 hours. That 3 hours worth of work I procrastinated for, I think, 6, 7 hours, or pretty much all of yesterday. On top of that, the friend of mine that I usually run with, Mayur, um, asked if I had been training regularly because I have a marathon coming up and I did DNF the last one and I do not like the taste it left in my mouth. As a defensive instinct, I lied to him and I said I've been training, I've been running, and it's only later on that I realized that he was holding up a mirror and my ego saw that as an attack and got all defensive when in reality he's only telling me something that I would want him to tell me, which is that I hold myself to a higher standard. It turns out it really is very, very easy to let things slip and to let things decay and to let things sit and to laze around and just go with the flow, man. And precisely because it's so easy is why you're never going to get the things that you want out of it, because you're never conditioning yourself and your mind to be able to handle the things that you need to be able to handle if you want anything of value, because the nature of value is that it is found where effort is expensed. And if I am not finding as much value in my life right now, and I think that means that I haven't been putting that much effort into my life. If I find nothing to be meaningless, if I find everything to be meaningless and nothing to be meaningful, then that means I haven't been putting enough effort into my life to find that meaning. I can't sit in the same place every day mentally and expect anything to change. And as much as I know all of this, it turns out when you've been habituated by yourself and conditioned to an extent by the world to kind of live mindlessly for years on end, it's very hard to come back to these truths that you kind of get lost very, very often. You mistake mindlessness for freedom. And I've done this before. I've seen my consciousness as a burden because it is the thing that separates me from the animal that I am, and it is often that I make the mistake of conflating the animal that I am with the freedoms that I want to exercise. I see, or rather, so far, I have always made the mistake of seeing letting my desires run amok as freedom. When in reality, that's not freedom at all. I'm trading one form of enslavement to another. I'm trading one set of हाँ दीदी. I'm trading one set of conditions for another. Quick side note. I realize how much of my life I need to be grateful for. When I know there exists people like my maid. When there exists people who don't have as much freedom over their time to exercise with whatever they choose to. And now I find that the freedom that I have with my time has corrupted me. That I'm not responsible enough for this freedom. That I must impose upon myself the restriction of this freedom because I do not use it responsibly. I must view myself as my own ward to be protected, to be disciplined. I'm experimenting with this thought here, but do you view yourself as a child to be reared? If so, if you are the father to yourself, if you are the person that is going to guide you, will you let your chun will you let your child run wild? Will you let your child be swayed by every whim? Or would you guide through discipline, through patience, through consistent repeated effort? The dichotomy of man is that you are both the cart and the horse. You are both that which pulls and that which is being pulled. And I've lived too often in the perspective of that which is being pulled. Lived too often in the perspective of the child. In the great balance of those things, I have failed. But as it turns out, this failure is never a permanent state. It is something that I can never undo, that I can never get back this time. But I can always control the time going forward. Or rather, I can control my actions in the time going forward and tip more towards that of discipline. Because if life only has the meaning that you give it, and you only find the meaning if you put enough effort into it, then I must put significantly more effort into the way that I conduct myself if I am to hope if I am to hope of finding any meaning to this life. That either path becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. the path of meaninglessness and the path of meaningfulness. One is filled with hedonism, the other with stoic discipline. And I think the path that I choose has to be somewhere in between. So far, I've tipped too far to the hedonistic side, too far to the nihilism that questions the meaning behind each action by viewing it from the universal perspective rather than the perspective of myself. See, that's the thing, right? Anything becomes pointless if you look at it from a far away enough distance. All of life, all of humankind becomes pointless if you look at it from Mars, if you look at it from the perspective of the infinite universe. But nevertheless, this life matters to you. So, so I have to look now from the perspective of me. I have to look now at myself as as a separate entity, as a child to be disciplined, because without that discipline, I will run wild, and like a runaway diesel engine, I will crash, I will fail. And it is not it is not the novel failure that is usually encouraged. It is the failure that is repeated again and again to the point where it is no longer failure, or sorry, it is no longer a mistake. It is a conscious decision. Because failure once is a test. Failure the second time is a mistake. But failure the third time is a choice. And I find that I've been making that choice again and again because I've made that mistake of thinking that freedom equates running wild. That is not what freedom is. Freedom is a responsibility. And it is proportionate to how responsible I am that I give myself freedom. So ask yourself, would you give yourself the responsibilities? Would you give yourself the responsibilities that, or rather, the proportionate freedom to the responsibilities that you have? Oh my god, I think I lost my train of thought there. But the idea is if you categorize the frivolousness of your behavior over a spectrum that ranges between being a child and being an adult, and you correlate that frivolousness inversely with responsibility, that the more frivolous you are, the less responsible you are. And the less responsible you are, the less freedom you should get. So in the things that you are frivolous, in the things that you are the least responsible, you must get the least amount of freedom. You must give yourself the least amount of freedom. And in the things that you are least frivolous and the most responsible, you must give yourself the utmost level of freedom. And if I had to objectively look at myself, it is across all fields of my interest that I have been frivolous with, that I have not given any disciplined thought to. So then my freedoms there must be restricted because I am not responsible enough to hold on to those freedoms. If you hand the steering wheel of a car to a child and the car ends up crashing, do you blame the child or do you blame yourself? I do not want to be in a position in my life where I am blaming myself. Or rather, I no longer want to be in a position in my life where I'm blaming myself. I no longer want to be in a position in my life where I'm found in this endless cycle of regret. As much as I have articulated it, I don't know exactly what has to change, but one certain thing has to change for sure, which is that I treat this freedom as a privilege and know that I am not entitled to this privilege right now, that I'm not responsible enough for this privilege right now. So I volunteer to take away the freedoms that I've given myself because I know I am not responsible enough to handle them. That means the freedom of a that means the freedom of just mindlessly browsing, out of question. That means the freedom of sitting down to watch a show, out of question. That means the freedom of playing a video game, out of question. The freedom to procrastinate, out of question. All of these freedoms I am not ready for because I'm not disciplined enough to temper myself when it comes to exercising these freedoms. So it is until that I'm disciplined enough, I must restrict these freedoms from myself. It is that idea that I think it was the philosopher Plato, I'm not 100% sure who this was, but I remember coming across a YouTube video that spoke about how wise men don't rely on their willpower, they rely on their systems. And it took the example of the fictional story of some Greek philosopher who, while heading out to sea, instructed his crewmen to bind him to the mast of his ship. He did so knowing that he will not be able to resist the songs of the sirens, and he did not allow himself to fall prey to the weakness of his willpower. He said to himself, I am not responsible enough for the freedom to be unbound. So I must bind myself in order to be free. It is exchanging, once again, it is exchanging one form of restraint for another. But it is the latter form, the one that you place onto yourself, consciously, willingly. It is that latter form of restraint that ends up giving you so much meaning in your life. It's almost beautiful, the wordplay, that you bind yourself in order to bind yourself with this world. You cut away to find meaning rather than attach more. You sculpt. Anyways, I think that's the end of any coherent thought that I can have for today. I'm gonna go catch some Z's and actually work on my discipline. Anyways, good morning to you, to the camera and to the ether, but good night for me. Bye bye.